What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So it's about that time when we're going to start seeing rumors around Nintendo Directs pop up online. I mean, we're heading into June when one's expected, along with that Xbox showcase and whatever we have at Summer Games Fest. But seems like we could have a different Nintendo event here coming up kind of soon, and we're going to talk about that one here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a massive, I'm going to say shocking game leak, actually, that hit the internet. I did not think I would ever see this happen. And we're also going to be talking about Switch Sports and the UK sales starts as it continues to dominate, and the PlayStation 5 that appears to be finding its way into stores a bit more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps that a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with EA and Lord of the Rings. There was an announcement yesterday for a new game that had about 5 seconds of hype online until people read the rest of the headline. We can see this posted up. This over on Gamatsu. Electronic Arts announces the Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth. Look at we got the nice little key art here. Electronic Arts pairing up with Middle-earth Enterprises for a mobile game. And that's kind of where the hype deflated just about immediately. This from developer Capital Games, in cooperation with Middle-earth Enterprises, have announced free-to-play collectible role-playing game, The Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth, for mobile. Limited regional beta testing will begin this summer. They say it's turn-based RPG. It's going to be a gacha style game, right? Obviously, those elements will be woven in there, I'm sure, quite extensively. It's one of those things where I'm sure Lord of the Rings fans were hoping for something a bit different with this kind of key art going up, but it makes a lot of money, that being these free-to-play gacha mobile games. And at this point, I'm looking at EA as, look, just deliver Skate 4 in good shape, and I'll be happy. Also, while we talk about these big AAA games that are racking up sales of 9, 10, 11, 12 million copies, and the parent company's not exactly thrilled about it, it's nice to hear about these smaller games that are finding overwhelming success, like Stardew Valley. Take a look at this. This was posted up over on their press site under History, where they say, as of March 2022, Stardew Valley has sold over 20 million copies across all platforms, with 13 million copies sold on PC alone. I mean, this game in general for a lot of people is very addicting. It's out on a ton of platforms, right? It's on PC, Mac, Linux, Xbox, PlayStation 4, and Switch. And it's also been put on iOS and Android devices. So yeah, there's a lot of places to buy it. And I think there's also quite a few people who have just bought it multiple times. And I mean, they keep updating the game, adding more and more content to it without going the way of all the microtransactions and seasons and battle passes. No, it's just a good game. You just buy it and you kind of move on. You play it for what a lot of people are doing now, hundreds of hours. So hey, hats off to Stardew Valley and Concerned Ape. I'm very curious what their next game is going to be like when that comes out. Oh, and in more disappointing news, we may have found out what happened to Titanfall 3. Remember, that was on that NVIDIA leak list. We can see this posted up by Jeff Grubb over on Twitter, attempting to ruin my day here, saying Titanfall 3 in the NVIDIA leak is real. It came out already and was called Apex Legends. This quote tweeting the gaming updates and countdowns, seeing the Titanfall 3 pre-order at GameStop in Germany. I'm not too surprised to hear about this because people do look at Apex Legends and are like, this is basically like Titanfall, but do you have plans for something that's just called Titanfall, EA and Respawn? We've heard from Respawn that they haven't forgotten about Titanfall or the fans for that franchise, because Titanfall 2 is very, very good, especially on the campaign side. And I've thought about, look, they have their multiplayer live service title with Apex Legends. No need to compete with that on the multiplayer side of things, but if EA is really like invested in some of these single player experiences, like what we've seen with Jedi Fallen Order and other titles that Respawn's working on, why not try a smaller game in the Titanfall universe that's just a campaign experience? Doesn't have to be full price. Doesn't have to be this massive investment where, oh, we gotta sell 10 million copies or something. Release something maybe a little smaller, 30, 40 bucks, a nice slice of campaign that's like 7 or 8 hours long, and see what kind of response you get there. At least give something to the Titanfall community, because they kind of need it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and a potential event coming up here soon. I also want to throw one other thing in here, because a lot of people were messaging me about this. This having to do with a new 2D Sonic game that's rumored to be in development. We can see this. It was posted up over on Nintendo Life, citing Zippo Speaks and Comic Book GameSpot.com, where they say a new 2D entry to the long-running Sonic the Hedgehog series is reportedly in development at Sega. Specifically, Sonic Team is said to be working on the game with no outside development. The new game is reportedly a follow-up to the Sonic Advance and Sonic Rush games, much in the same way that Sonic Mania is a sequel of sorts to the classic lineup from Genesis and Mega Drive days. You'll be able to play as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, making this the first modern entry to feature all three playable characters since 2004's Sonic Advance 3. Now, what are the odds that there is a new 2D Sonic game in development after Sonic Mania? Pretty high. I mean, you look at the 2D Sonic games, clearly not the investment that goes into something like Sonic Frontiers, but seems to do pretty well. Sonic Mania reviewed very, very well. It sold well enough. So yeah, why not keep the 2D Sonic games going alongside of the big 3D outings like what we're seeing with Sonic Frontiers coming up? I am curious about a few things when it comes to these 2D Sonic games. I guess because it is geared towards like Sonic Advanced, it would adopt that art style, but that's always the part that's kind of tough with these 2D games, because if you continue to make more of them, you want them to feel distinct, or at least one that doesn't seem like it's just continuation or exactly the same as what they did with Sonic Mania. I guess going the way of that Sonic Advanced art style might at least help make it feel different. But either way, that's probably the biggest thing you wrestle with. Do you go back to that standard 16-bit nostalgia like we had with Sonic Mania, or do you try to do something completely different like we have with Sonic 4? Now, as for a big Nintendo event coming up here pretty soon, that has to do with Nintendo and an Indie World presentation. A Nintendo Direct is going to happen in June when we kind of figure it will, right? Like, right around that Xbox showcase. I don't think Nintendo is going to stray too far off the path they generally set for themselves in that second week for June when there normally would be an E3. It sets things up pretty nicely for them there. But an Indie Direct can kind of just happen when they want it to, and we're sort of due for one at this point. But we can see this posted up over on Games Radar, saying on a thread on Fama boards, as spotted by Reddit user Linkwink, insider Emily Rogers teased any fans of any games in here. Also, Nate Drake is awesome. Okay, well, with Nate, he's still arguing against his Metroid Dread thing. I'm sorry, Nate, it's over. The numbers are out right now, or they should be. Oh, we're going over those, but something tells me Sean's gonna be playing through Balan Wonderworld, even if you're trying to talk about shipped versus sold. For Nintendo got their money. That's what matters here in this bet. But yeah, I think an Indie World is coming up here pretty soon. This week, maybe. I mean, we know like Nintendo likes to do. They like to announce it when Newswave goes up, so maybe look out for that. But I think in the next week or two, yes, you will see an Indie Direct ahead of the E3 typical summer direct that we're used to at this point. I mean, the nice thing about Indie Directs is anything's possible there. Maybe it's finally time to see Silk Song, maybe Sports Story, and then who knows what else. But yeah, I think we're getting into that Nintendo Direct season in general, which means you'll probably see that indie showcase follow. Next up, let's talk about that massive and shocking leak that I did not think would ever find its way out there. And that has to do with Duke Nukem Forever. I'm not talking about the Duke Nukem Forever that eventually released, like 15 years later or something from when it was originally being developed back in the mid to late 90s. And it came out on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and it just wasn't very good. But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were seeing some demos of it, specifically E3 2001, and it looked like it was kind of building off of the Duke Nukem 3D, a game that was on consoles at the time, the original PlayStation, the Sega Saturn. We had one on Nintendo 64. So I kind of figured Duke Nukem Forever, if it did come out when it was originally planned to, in that early 2000 period, probably would have been that generation with the PS2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, and it would have been very interesting. But we never got it, right? Like, they rebooted it, they scrapped it, it was a disaster. It's a whole story. Like, he read through and eventually found its way to Gearbox, Take-Two, 2K, and it did come out. But it looks like that original build is going to be released here soon. In fact, it popped up on, well, good old 4chan, which 4chan's kind of been coming through recently with some of these leaks. The Game Boy Advance emulator on the Switch, and now Duke Nukem Forever from 2001. They had full gameplay footage of this, and there's even a list of some of the description here. This is posted up by Duke4.net, which I'll leave linked down below. And some of the quotes from apparently the person, just X0R, who's posting about the content with the video that you can see some of here, saying almost every chapter is present in some form. A huge chunk is playable. A huge chunk is blockouts with no enemies. All of the E3 content is there. So If you go back and watch that E3 showcase that they did, or the demo, apparently all of it's there in this leak that seems to be prepped and is coming out in the next couple of weeks here. Say not just the editor, we'll be releasing the full source code too, so I'm sure people will be digging through that to see what exactly was going on in the game. All weapons are functional with the exception of the chainsaw and the freezer. Further down, they were asked about when they were planning to release this. They just say June, so we'll keep an eye on this to see if more footage comes out, more information as they approach next month, with apparently just a dump of all the source code and everything here. It's not a complete game. They did mention that. It was just never finished. I almost wonder if people will go in and work to at least complete it to the point where it is something you could play so many levels of and just kind of explore it there. The full source code, who knows? People could really dive into this thing. But it's just very strange to see this just randomly pop up. I mean, it seems to happen on 4chan from time to time where you'll never expect it, but yeah, there it is. There's the game files for apparently Duke Nukem Forever from 20 years ago. The original build we saw, not the one that was rebooted and transformed into what we got in 2011. Next up, let's talk about a really cool project that's currently ongoing, and this has to do with Need for Speed Underground 2 being rebuilt in Unreal Engine 4. And we've mentioned this from time to time that I believe Need for Speed Underground 2 is like the pinnacle for the Need for Speed series. People will say like Carbon or Most Wanted. I get that, but like Need for Speed Underground 2 was just such an awesome time, and sure, nostalgia and all of this, but like back then on the original Xbox, the PS2, or the GameCube, getting that game with the Skyline being like, the GTR Skyline being like the ultimate car, and it was pretty cool. You had the Doors playing with Snoop Dogg, but either way, seeing this game now, which you can see here, being redone, it's pretty cool. This is something that EA would never do because of I'm sure the car licensing, and it makes more sense for them to do that and make a new Need for Speed Underground or whatever they're making coming up here soon. Like, Need for Speed is supposed to be unveiled here anytime. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be part of Summer Games Fest. It makes sense for them to drop that in there since they won't have an EA Play Live. But just something about seeing this on YouTube was just really cool. Obviously hit me with a wave of nostalgia for that, but the fact that they've gotten it to this point is pretty impressive. I don't know if EA or anyone would really come in with any kind of like cease and desist or anything. I just don't think they care enough to do that here. And I don't know if this will ever get to a point where it's completed and released, but hey, if it is, I would definitely be checking it out there. As for getting Need for Speed Underground 2, some people have asked about that. I think you have to get a CD key in some way, and it's kind of sketchy doing that now anyway on places like eBay or Amazon there. So yeah, I hope we eventually have this come out and we can just download it and play Need for Speed Underground 2 and Unreal Engine 4 with current hardware. We'll see though. It seems like a pretty serious undertaking, so it could be a little while. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the UK sales charts. It gave us an update around Switch Sports, and it also showed that PlayStation 5s are starting to find themselves in the stores a bit more frequently, which are affecting these charts. We can see this. This posted up over on GamesIndustry.biz with Switch Sports still at the top, #1. It had a 32% drop in box sales week on week, but certainly wasn't enough to knock it from the top spot, with LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga right behind it there with a 24% sales drop. But take a look at #3, Horizon Forbidden West. It had a 108% sales increase week on week, and a lot of this has to do with the PlayStation 5 continuing to find its way onto store shelves, or just in the stores, I'm sure online and all this, in the UK. And this is something I've been really curious about, and we've seen Sony be kind of reluctant to drop the prices on these games, and it sort of makes sense now as you see these charts because the games are still selling on the PS5 when PS5s are in stock. At this point, if you can find a PS5 at $500, an extra $70 for a game doesn't seem that bad considering, yes, the PS5 is still like $700 on places like eBay. We can see down from that, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is #4. It actually jumped up from 6. I know that's a DLC effect on that, but like, wow. Nintendo is in no hurry at all for that next Mario Kart game. Kirby and the Forgotten Land at 5. Pokemon Legends Arceus at 6. Elden Ring 7. Grand Theft Auto 5, because why not, at 8. Sifu. Okay, this was the boxed copy of Sifu that came out. Remember, it released digitally, and they said that they would have a boxed copy come out later on. But what's interesting about this one, 81% of the sales were on the PlayStation 5. So only 19% were on the PS4, which kind of shows we are having that shift away from last generation to current gen. And I feel like Sony's probably seeing this reflected across the board and on a lot of their cross-gen games. Kind of makes me think that after God of War, we won't be seeing any more cross-gen from Sony, but we'll see about that. And then to round out the top 10, we have Minecraft on the Switch. But certainly a good week for Switch Sports, keeping that #1 spot. I think that is going to be a big time seller for Nintendo, especially with the casual audience there. And then for the PS5 itself, finding its way into store shelves and working some of these $70 games like Horizon up the charts there, and even Sifu, which I think is the same price on the PS4 and the PS5, still being chosen at an 81% rate on that PlayStation 5 system, just goes to show, yes, it really is a stock situation now, as we all already know, but the numbers and the charts certainly show it here. When the PS5 comes in stock, pushes these games up the charts, certainly has nothing to do with there being a lack of demand, that's for sure. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, will Nintendo have an Indie Direct this month? 32% said yes, look at this. 68% said no. I kind of feel like people are just looking towards June and they're like, well, that's when the next event will be for Nintendo, like usual. They'll probably even do like a 2-week lead time for an announcement as we head into June, which doesn't really leave any time for an Indie World showcase, right? Unless there's one this week or next week. Most likely it's that situation of we'll see you at E3 or where E3 would be, but who knows? I mean, technically an Indie Direct could pop up at any time. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Sam saying, Square's current issues remind me a lot of Capcom during the 7th gen. They kept trying to appeal to a Western audience with things like Dark Void and that Bionic Commando reboot, and most of their attempts failed miserably. I really do believe that Square just need to get back to the basics. If you're a video game company, you only need like 2, maybe 3 really good intellectual properties you can leverage for the rest of your company to just work, right? Like, Square can take chances with these things that Team Asano are doing because Final Fantasy sells so well. And I'm not just talking about the game itself, like the video games they release. So much merchandise and other media go into that, right? And the fact that Square has Final Fantasy that can really just branch off into a ton of different games, Dragon Quest that can do the same thing, they're in pretty good shape, I would say, as long as they focus in and mostly just try to work on that. Capcom was in a really bad spot, much worse than where Square is now. Square's still worth quite a bit, and they weren't exactly going bankrupt having those Western studios. Capcom was legitimately in trouble, and they decided, you know what? Let's just focus in. Monster Hunter, Resident Evil being the big ones, they did, and now they're in a much better position to even get a little risky with some of their releases. But that's all Square needs to do. Double down on the things that got you here in the first place. Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There was a new 2D Sonic in development. Does that surprise you? And how would you go about doing the art style for that game if you were in charge of it? And then also, what about a Nintendo Indie World Direct? Do you think one's coming up here, or are we just kind of hanging out until June and then Duke Nukem Forever, not the one from 2011, the one from 2001 at E3. Did you ever think we would see that leak out online? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.